Alright, this is one of those rare occasions where I feel compelled to share my situation. Normally, I handle these things privately, but this particular issue has grown far too complex to manage alone. Let me start from the beginning. In my household, my husband, Bobby, has an incredibly close relationship with his family, especially his parents. His devotion to them runs so deep that he fulfills their every request without question, regardless of how unreasonable it may seem. This unwavering loyalty has started to become a problem. The Bobby refuses to acknowledge it. Every time I try to talk to him about it, he becomes defensive and dismisses my concerns. The main issue, and the reason I'm seeking advice, is that Bobby has always gone above and beyond for his parents. From the very start of our marriage, he's felt obligated to indulge their wishes. I understand the importance of caring for one's parents. I would do the same if mine lived closer. But there has to be a limit. Unfortunately, Bobby doesn't see it that way. Since we both started earning steady incomes, his parents have often asked us for money. The strange thing is, they aren't struggling financially. In fact, they live quite comfortably and can easily afford their own luxuries. At first, I went along with it because, well, they're his parents and I wanted to respect that. But as time went on, I started feeling uneasy. We've sent them so much money over the years, enough that we could have taken a few international vacations by now. I've tried explaining to Bobby that while we're doing fine financially, it's irresponsible to keep funneling so much of our extra income to his parents. We need to start thinking about our own future, saving for kids, buying a home, making significant purchases down the line. At first, he seemed to understand where I was coming from, but before long, the conversation turned into an argument. He insisted that since we're living comfortably, why shouldn't we help his parents out with the extra money? It's not that I want to stop helping them altogether. I just think there needs to be a balance between supporting them and taking care of our own future. That's what I'm struggling with, finding that balance. Bobby, however, remains firm in his decision to keep supporting his parents financially, and it's driving a wedge between us. The situation has frustrated me to the point where I almost walked out during one of our arguments. My anger boiled over when I remembered how his parents treated me in the past. If they had ever made me feel like part of the family, maybe I could be more understanding. But they never accepted me. They weren't there for us when we needed them most. I can still remember when Bobby and I were just starting out, fresh out of college, and barely making ends meet. We went to his parents, hoping for a little help to buy our first home, only to be met with cold refusal. They didn't even take a moment to consider our situation. Instead, we were lectured about adult responsibilities and how we needed to learn to save for ourselves. It was less about offering guidance and more about dismissing our struggles entirely. And now, years later, here we are, sending them money they don't even need, while Bobby refuses to see the bigger picture. Despite my frustrations, I don't know how to get through to him. I bit my tongue, choosing to keep my thoughts to myself. It was disheartening to see Bobby's parents so unwilling to help their own son, but I resigned myself to accept their decision if Bobby could make peace with it. However, the issue resurfaced about a year and a half ago when I inherited a house from my mother. It was a lovely property, but it needed major renovations. While we had saved some money, it wasn't nearly enough to cover the necessary repairs. This recurring pattern, needing financial assistance and being repeatedly rejected by Bobby's parents, who nonetheless had no issue asking us for money, began to strain how I viewed our relationship dynamics. The constant tug of war over finances exposed a painful imbalance. They were more than willing to take from us but refused to offer help when we needed it most. Faced with the challenge of making the inherited house livable, we decided to approach his parents again, hoping this time they might be willing to lend a modest sum. Unfortunately, they refused once more. This time, they told us to stop asking for their money and to figure things out on our own. They even suggested I sell the house, dismissing it as a waste of space and something that looks like crap. Their words cut deep. This house wasn't just a property to me. It was a cherished connection to my mother, filled with memories and sentimental value. I bit back my hurt and anger, thinking it would be impolite to react at the time, though part of me now wishes I had spoken up. Maybe if I had, their blatant disregard for our situation might not have been so bold. But instead, I chose to let it go. Determined not to let their rejection stop me, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I worked tirelessly, scraping together funds, and poured every bit of my effort into the renovations. Slowly but surely, as I started earning more, the project became more manageable. After months of hard work, the house was completely transformed into something beautiful, a home I was incredibly proud of, a testament to my dedication. A few months later, I finally had the chance to show off what I had accomplished. I invited my in-laws over for dinner to celebrate my mother-in-law's birthday, and by that time, the house looked stunning. I was proud of all the hard work I had put into transforming it and hoped the evening would go smoothly. Typically, our family gatherings are peaceful as long as the conversation doesn't revolve around money, which is always a sensitive topic with them. When they arrived and saw the renovations, I could tell they were taken aback. Their eyes widened as soon as they stepped inside, clearly surprised by how much the house had changed. Internally, I felt a small sense of satisfaction, knowing they hadn't expected me to achieve such a dramatic transformation. They complimented the house profusely, which was flattering at first, but soon their praise began to feel overwhelming. They started inspecting every corner, asking detailed questions about how much everything had cost. At first, I tried to brush it off as natural curiosity. After all, they knew we hadn't had a lot of extra money to spare, and they hadn't contributed a dime to the renovations. But as their questions continued, it became clear their interest wasn't about admiring the hard work. I could feel them tallying up the expenses in their heads, trying to figure out exactly how much we had spent. It was intrusive, almost demeaning, as if the value of my efforts could only be measured by how much money we had poured into the project. The dinner itself started off well enough, with light, enjoyable conversation, but things quickly shifted when my mother-in-law brought up the subject of dream vacations. She asked me about my ideal getaway, but I could tell by her tone and her disinterested expression that she wasn't really listening. It felt like she was just waiting for me to finish speaking. Her sudden excitement after my brief response seemed forced, which only heightened my suspicions. And soon, the real reason for their visit emerged. They wanted us to help finance a vacation home. After years of refusing to help us when we needed it, here they were, asking us to contribute to a luxury they desired, a vacation home, no less. They were well off and more than capable of saving for it themselves, so why were they turning to us for help? It became clear that they had assumed, based on the renovations I had managed to complete, that we must be flush with cash. Nothing could have been further from the truth. When I asked them to explain why they needed a vacation home, their answer was simply that they were bored and wanted a change of scenery for weekends. I was shocked by their sense of entitlement. I calmly explained that we didn't have extra money to spare for something so extravagant, but then Bobby's reaction stunned me. He turned to me with a look of disbelief, as if I had just committed a terrible offense. "Spending on my parents' happiness is never a waste," he said coldly, his glare making it clear he didn't share my frustration at their request. I had to be careful with my words, though the situation left me baffled and hurt. Bobby's reaction highlighted a deeper issue in our relationship, our differing priorities and understanding of financial responsibility. Deep down, Bobby knew I was right. A vacation home was hardly a necessity, certainly not a matter of life and death. His father still had a job, and they could easily save up for such a luxury on their own. But instead of doing that, they seemed intent on having us finance their comfort. Then it hit me. Bobby wasn't an only child. He had an older brother, Jack. So why weren't they asking him for the money? When I brought this up, the mood in the room shifted, and I could feel the tension rise. It turned out they didn't want to burden Jack because he wasn't as financially stable, or so they claimed. He had children, they argued, and his expenses were focused on his family. I pointed out that Jack's financial situation wasn't all that different from ours. He earned about the same, but his money went toward his children. I mentioned that Bobby and I planned to start a family soon, and continually supporting his parents could jeopardize our ability to provide for our future kids. Their response was dismissive. Since we didn't have children yet, they argued we should have plenty of funds to spare. What followed was an onslaught of emotional manipulation, though it wasn't directed at me. They knew I wouldn't bend. Instead, they aimed their pleas at Bobby, lamenting their loneliness and boredom now that both of their sons were busy with their own lives. They painted the vacation home as a solution to their isolation, and Bobby, always the dutiful son, swayed by their emotional appeal. I found myself in a delicate situation, trying to navigate these increasingly fraught discussions without letting my in-laws realize they had backed us into a corner. But things took a drastic turn just a week ago. Bobby and I had the worst argument we've ever had. Though it never turned physical, his words cut deep. He told me that the $420,000 he planned to give his parents wasn't just mine to decide on. He claimed he had been considerate in the past by asking for my opinion, but no longer felt obligated to seek my approval. The argument hit its peak when he went ahead and transferred the money to his parents, without any further discussion with me. I only found out when my mother-in-law casually mentioned receiving the funds as if it were no big deal. I was furious, not just about the money, but about the blatant disrespect for our shared decision-making in our marriage. Bobby's secretive actions left me feeling deeply betrayed, sparking a fierce debate over our financial priorities and the respect we owed each other. He knew I opposed his decision, yet he went ahead and donated the entire $420,000 he had saved over the years to his parents, leaving us with nothing. When I confronted him and urged him to retrieve the funds, he dismissed me outright, insisting he would manage his relationship with his parents on his own. Despite my reminders that significant financial decisions should be made together, he wouldn't hear it. Our disagreement seemed to have worn him down. In the heat of our argument, he shockingly threatened me with divorce. He shouted that if I interfered with his choice to support his parents financially, he would leave me. The absurdity of it hit me hard. I had stood by him through every high and low, and now he was willing to abandon our marriage for the sake of his parents' desires over our shared future. I couldn't help but question whether he cared at all about the plans we had made together. Building a life, having children, and finding happiness as a unit. It seemed to me that none of it mattered to him anymore. His focus was solely on fulfilling his parents' wishes while I felt neglected and sidelined. In a moment of anger, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. A week has passed since that day, and he hasn't come home. Despite my countless texts, calls, and voicemails, he continues to ignore me or leave me hanging. The hurt runs deep. I never imagined something like this could drive Bobby away. When I reached out to my in-laws, I discovered he had been staying with them since he left. He hasn't returned home even once. I'm overwhelmed with stress and confusion, grappling with the fear that our marriage could be ending over what feels like a trivial disagreement yet is so profound. As the days stretch into more than a week without Bobby, the uncertainty of our future looms heavily over me. I had reached a pivotal moment. Initially, I was hesitant, unsure if severing ties was truly the right decision. But the ongoing chaos, coupled with the blatant disregard from Bobby and his family, solidified my resolve. If Bobby was threatening divorce, then perhaps that was the inevitable path we were headed toward. So I took the initiative and contacted my lawyer that very morning. During our conversation, my lawyer laid out my options, not only regarding the divorce but also potential legal actions given the circumstances. As we spoke, another stark realization hit me. I no longer wanted to be tied down by the memories within the walls of the house my mother had left me. Once a symbol of her love, the house had become a constant reminder of the tumultuous times with Bobby. Determined to move forward, I made the decision to sell the house. It was entirely in my name, a final gift from my mother, which legally allowed me to sell it without Bobby's consent. The sale turned out to be quite profitable, providing me with the financial security I needed to navigate the legal proceedings ahead. The very next day, after finalizing the divorce papers, I had them sent to Bobby. I knew exactly when he received them because my phone rang almost immediately afterward. It was Bobby, furious, incredulous. He ranted about how absurd I was being, claiming he had been planning to file for divorce anyway. His shock only deepened when he learned about the legal actions I had already initiated. The call was heated, filled with accusations and disbelief, marking a clear turning point in what had become an irreparable rift. Bobby completely lost his temper during the conversation, and as his anger escalated, I realized I couldn't take it any longer. Midway through his tirade, I hung up on him. As the days led up to the court case, I was a bundle of nerves. My mind was flooded with worries about the potential outcomes. What if the court ruled against me? What if I ended up losing everything, including the money? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I knew I had to push through to see this to the end. Despite my fears about the future, I didn't allow them to overwhelm me. I dressed confidently, put on my best smile, and walked up to the courthouse, ready to face whatever lay ahead. It was the day of the final hearing for our divorce, and to my surprise, everything turned out incredibly well. Not only was I able to keep all the proceeds from the sale of the house, but the court also ordered Bobby to pay me a substantial amount in alimony, fulfilling his legal obligation. This outcome was unexpected, especially receiving more money from Bobby, but it felt justified given the emotional and mental toll his actions had taken on me. Accepting this money felt like a reclaiming of my dignity. The disapproval and shock on my in-laws' faces as the verdict was read brought me a sense of vindication. They likely never anticipated that their manipulation would backfire so severely. They had thought they could exert control over me without consequences, but instead, they ended up losing significantly. Since then, life has been relatively calm. I did receive a harsh call from my mother-in-law who criticized my actions, accusing me of selfishness and lacking the ability to care for others. She even went as far as to say I would never be able to start my own family. Despite her words, I've been able to move forward. I used the money from the house sale to secure a new apartment for myself, where I could finally save without the constant pressure and demands from others. However, a part of me still questions the measures I took. Was taking him to court too extreme? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, so please share your opinions in the comments below. The situation took a surprising turn, but I felt it was necessary under the circumstances. As I scrolled through the comment section of my latest post, the range of opinions was striking. Some commenters defended Bobby, questioning what was the big deal about giving his parents $420,000 if he had $550,000. On the other hand, many disagreed vehemently, supporting my perspective. They pointed out that we had been financially assisting his parents for years while trying to establish our own financial security and save for a house. The debate in the comments was clearly divided. A significant number criticized my decision to sell the house and keep the money, labeling it disrespectful, given that the house was legally in my name. However, about half of the commenters backed my actions, asserting that it was exactly what I needed to do in light of the circumstances. So let's open this up for further discussion. Drop your comments below, and let's dive deeper into this situation.